Tom Clark's 6M podcast is a Boink Studios production. And now, on with the show.
Hey, what is up? Welcome to Tom Clark's 6M podcast. I'm your host, Tom Clark, and in this episode, I'm joined by co-host Phil Lindsey. We're continuing on with the Beatles Anthology here this week, kids. As you know, kids, in the previous episode about the Beatles Anthology, we covered parts 1 and 2. So today we are covering, as I said, parts 3 and 4. The powder keg that is Beatlemania is absolutely set to explode, okay? If they didn't prime it enough for you at the end of part 2, then you must have fallen asleep because you knew that something big was coming. And of course, that something big is the explosion, the big bucket of dynamite that is Beatlemania. And it happens. It kicks us off today for part 3. Lots to talk about, covering 2 parts. We're going to cram as much as we can in here today. As we told you kids last time out, this is not a comprehensive review of the Beatles Anthology as seen on Disney+. This is just as much as we can possibly cram in here and as much as we could possibly talk about. That's what you're getting here today, so we hope you're ready. But before we tackle that, let's do this. The Beatles Anthology is a multimedia documentary project released in 1995 and 1996, created by the surviving Beatles, and Apple Corps is the official, definitive story of the band. In 2025, the anthology celebrated its 30th anniversary. The project included an 8-part TV documentary, 3 double CD sets featuring rare and previously unreleased recordings, and a massive companion book. The documentary covers the band's origins, early years in Liverpool and Hamburg, and rise to global fame. Part 3, that we're discussing first here today, covers the Beatles' arrival in the United States and the immediate whirlwind of Beatlemania that followed, from the Ed Sullivan Show to A Hard Day's Night, and the band's first taste of worldwide fame and notoriety. And that is your lowdown here today for part 3, leading into part 4 of the Beatles Anthology. So, Phil, when we covered parts 1 and 2, I know you said you hadn't fully watched all of the show or all the series when it came out, dropped years ago, or in the years since then. What do you remember about part 3, or had you even seen part 3 until now?
Yeah, I did not see it. Watching the next 2 episodes kind of confirmed for me that I've never actually seen the anthology.
Well, there's so many clips, right? This thing's been clipped to death.
Yeah.
So, like, right? I'm sure over the years you're like, well, maybe I have seen it. You know what I mean? Because if you're a fan like I am, you deep dive as much as you can. So that makes sense.
Yes.
So, what surprised you about part 3 as we start off here today? I mean, I'm sure you knew a lot of the stuff already, but what jumped out at you the most about part 3?
Well, how quickly they kind of moved past the trip to America. It's like they covered it, but it didn't even fill up the entire episode. And I guess because we've gotten documentaries that are only about the trip to America. I was surprised how quickly they moved on from the trip to America, especially with how much they hyped it up as the next big topic at the end of episode 2. I thought, oh, we're going to get a whole episode at least about their trip to America. And we didn't. And I'm not saying that like a bad thing. I was just kind of surprised how quickly they moved on because I've seen other things where they went into in depth of like everything they did on a tour. And it was like incredibly detailed. This was just like, it covered like the surface level stuff. It covered like their vacation and stuff in America. And then it just moved on to the next thing.
Yeah, it moves on to Hard Day's Night. To your point, the episode on Disney Plus is 56 minutes, 30 some seconds, or it's an hour, whatever it is. Let's see. 59 minutes, 33 seconds. At the 28-minute mark is when they go to Hard Day's Night. So you only get 28 minutes of their trip to the U.S.
Yeah, I was surprised, but again, I don't think that's a bad thing because we have so much material on a trip to the U.S. But I also think that that's one of those big culture shock moments where, just like they said in the anthology, it's like, yeah, we went to America, we felt like we conquered America, and then was on to the next thing. And when you saw how busy their careers are, I could see on from their perspective, yeah, this was this big trip and it was this big deal to Americans. But to them, it was just like, yeah, this was a big part of our career and a big part of the rollout uh once we became this global success, but then it was on to the next thing. Then it was next on to the next country.
Yeah, to them, they just didn't understand. They took it in good humor, right? But they didn't understand quite why people were losing their minds.
Yeah.
I was going to say, I do like the bit about when the girls rush up to the car and they're in, pause in the back seat. When they get to the window, I'm always thinking, well, what now, girls? What's the plan? And there's no plan. They just look at them.
Yeah.
I'm like, dude, I don't know. It's weird.
Yeah. Of course, 'cause they're teenage girls. Um 'Cause I
Of
I don't
course.
because of course I don't, and I'm not saying that like in a, derogatory way, but I think that of course
Sure.
they're not thinking about it that way. They're just like, "No, I wanna get close to them," and then it's just like, "Oh, well, I don't know what I actually wanna do when I get in there." Like,
Right.
I just wanna try to get in there. I thought that they covered that stuff pretty well, in the documentary about their trip to America, and you had all of these girls that were like going to the hotel and camping out in the hotel, trying to get up
Hmm.
to up the stairs in the hotel to where their rooms are, and it's just like, yeah, they were kind of just doing a lot of stuff aimlessly. They were just there because they could be, which is, a very young people thing to do, very
Sure.
impetuous young person thing to do.
I mean, I just can't imagine loving something so much. I'm a fan of a lot of stuff. And like if you put me in front of certain people, I'll probably get a little starstruck. But I just even in my younger days, I don't know who you could have put me in front of that I would have lost it. I don't know. I don't know who that person would have been, but maybe I'm not a teenage girl and that's the problem, Phil.
Yeah. Um,
I don't know.
I always think it's funny when they show the clip of them doing that big press junket and they're standing up there answering the questions, and
So good.
it's like, yeah, they would just yell the questions at us and we would just yell back, and they seem to like that. It's like, yeah, that's
Yeah.
how a junket works. That's how a press scrum works.
That's Ringo. Ringo's like, oh, they seem to like it. My favorite bit of that whole thing for years has been when the guy says, sing for us, and they all at the same time say no. And then John goes, no, we need money first. I love that. That is the best thing ever, man.
Yeah, I love that because they're actually friends and their humor is so similar, that they often answer things in the exact same way, like in unison. Uh,
Hmm.
that's one of the things that Ringo talks about when they visit the Queen in the next episode, and she asks them, "How long have you guys been together?" And they both just say at the same time, 40 years.
Yep. Yeah, without even thinking, without even blinking, say it at the same time. Yeah. This episode, as we said, kids, it kicks off this chapter, I should say. This chapter kicks off with, they land in America. We don't actually get to the Sullivan appearance until around the 10-minute mark.
Mhm.
So for the first 10 minutes, we've got nothing but the chaos and hysteria and Beatlemania. We got Murray the K on here, the DJ that became known as the fifth Beatle, along with a multitude of other people through the years who were kind of known as the fifth Beatle. I thought that was interesting. They were talking to the guys on the phone. They were requesting Marvin Gaye. They weren't requesting their own records. Or like, I want to hear other stuff.
Yeah.
That was pretty cool. Them schmoozing it up with people they didn't know, surrounded, not for nothing, Phil. Yes, the money's coming in, but they can't enjoy it. And that comment was made at one point, like, well, there's money, but we can't get to it. And they're getting hugged on by women and that they've never met, and they're surrounded by people they don't know in a country that's not theirs. They don't know where they are or where they're going. They're just getting in the back of cars. Not that it isn't fun and awesome, but at some point, I wonder, did the nerves ever kick in? Like, dude, what if something happens to us over here? I got family back home. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, you could tell that they very much act like small town guys.
Yeah, they
They're
do
not
for
like
sure.
they're not big city guys, and you can very much see in the way that they react to a lot of things, the way that they kind of
Mm.
talk. Um, every time they cut back to Paul, and he's just like nonchalant answering these questions. He's in a he's on a boat. He's in a cabin answering questions for some reason.
Mm-hmm.
It's like the most zany Paul McCartney way to answer questions, but it fits with everything we know about him. And it makes it even funnier because every time they cut back to George, and George is like sitting in his backyard with like sunglasses
Yeah.
on, and then Ringo is like same thing, sitting in like side with sunglasses on. No, Paul's just like in his cabin on a boat. What?
Yeah. By the way, I think it's in chapter 4 that we see this where they're all at the table and Paul's animated. If you watch George and Ringo, they're not into it. Like, I'm not saying there was a weird vibe, but if you go back and watch that, and there's more to come at that table, by the way. But when you go back and watch that, you're like, man, were they just not? It kind of felt like they were going, oh, here goes Paul again. Jesus, that's how it felt to me, man. It's wild.
Paul kind of has this energy to him, and I've noticed it
Yeah,
for years that he enjoys being center of attention.
I totally agree. I think he wanted to be a star. I truly do.
Um, and I don't think that's in a way of like he sought out attention more than the others, but it just kind of felt like he was always born to be at the center, and I think that he put himself at the center a lot of times because he enjoyed it. He enjoyed the spotlight. I mean, there's a
Yeah,
reason we get into that in the fourth episode of how he's the first ever Beatle that has its own song in the group, and he even
yeah.
talks about how he never wanted to be singled out, but regardless, it happened, and
Mm-hmm.
um, there's multiple ways you can look at that, but I just think that that's part of it, and I think when you look at the way the other guys move, it's very clear that they're not like that. George is very reserved in some ways. I think George is kind of like I can take or leave a lot of this stuff. Um, and I think John has his way about him. John is just like, well, I didn't really sign up for all of this. I just wanted to be a musician. Like I didn't sign
Right.
up for some of the fame stuff that came with it. And then like Ringo, I hate saying it like this, but Ringo a lot of times just feels like he's along for the ride. He's like, yeah, this is cool, that's fun. And I don't think, a lot of times when you're a drummer, the drummer of the band is rarely center of attention.
Right. Of course.
I mean, but that's also what makes it funny that Paul is a bass player because often the bass player is not center of attention. He's the guy off to the side. It's either the lead singer, lead guitar.
Yeah, I mean the dynamic here is very different. One thing, there's only 4 of them. There's not 5 or
Yeah.
6. And you're right, like the Stones had like 6 people at one point, I think. But like, so that's not this. And also the way they're lined up. The bass player doesn't stand back by the drummer, that he lines up with the other 2 guys on the front of the stage.
Yeah. I mean, he's also lead singer as well. Yet,
Mhm.
I mean, again, I don't say all of this as a knock at Paul because, of course, I like Paul, but uh, yeah, there are some things. If you're looking to not like Paul, if you're looking for evidence that this guy is a control freak, or that he loves to be center of attention, all of the signs are there. When they talked about George in episode 4, and he talked about how, yeah, we talked about a minute, of him being a part of the songwriting team, and we just kind of agreed not to do it, and just how nonchalantly he says it, and just I don't think that he means for it to come off that way, but it
Sure.
comes off a little dismissive of George. And
Mhm.
I don't, again, I don't think that's his intent, but even when John talks about it, he's just like, yeah, he just wasn't up to the level that we were, and yeah, he wasn't up to a level that you guys were because you guys didn't collaborate with him.
Well, plus George had said in that episode too that they'd already written all their bad songs. He hadn't because he hadn't written songs yet.
Yes, and so I do
Yeah.
think that they were very. Yeah, I don't think that they were very nice to George sometimes. I think that they were very critical of him in times, and I think that he ended up growing as an artist by fire next to these guys. When
Yeah.
I think that they could have done more to nurture his songwriting, his
I
creativity.
agree with that. Yeah. And you said people, if they were looking for proof, they don't need to look very hard for proof. If they've got it,
No,
if people are determined to make Paul a villain of some sort, they can absolutely do it. Whether he meant to be that person or not, they can absolutely put a black hat on that guy. There's plenty of ways to do it.
absolutely. I think if you already felt that way, there's plenty of stuff to add to your confirmation bias. Um,
Mm-hmm.
he doesn't help himself in quite a few things that he says and does. Um, but again, you can see it. It's just certain things that he says and does where I'm like, oh yeah, this guy is something about him. He was born to stand out in front, and I think he kind of knows it.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's a bad thing. I think sometimes when you're in a group, somebody has to be the guy that steps forward and it's like, I'm going to take initiative. This is how I want things to sound. This is how I want things to look. And unfortunately, a lot of the times when you're that guy, you're going to take a lot more criticism and you're going to take a lot more flack than the rest of them. I mean, I think that's also what happened with Q-Tip. Q-Tip talked a lot about how um, he had to be the guy that's like, okay, this is what I want everything to sound like. This is what I want. This is how I want everything to be. I had to be the guy to take the initiative. Like Fife, come on, trying to get Fife to go to the gym, trying to get Fife to come to the
Mm-hmm.
studio, trying to get Fife to do this. And when you do things like that, sometimes it no longer feels like you're part of a collective or that you're being my friend. It feels like you're doting on me, and it always feels like it's something.
Yeah. Well, it's that John Fogerty dynamic in Credence as well.
Yeah.
Like Credence, like John was a genius. John was made for this. There's so much about that guy that you take a look at his songwriting and his body of work and you go, my God, he's one of those guys. You either have it or you don't have it.
Yes.
But it came at the expense of his bandmates, one of them being his brother. And but like you said, Phil, once you have that role, you take it and you either run with it and your band becomes a hit or you don't. I don't know.
Yeah. Somebody has to lead one way or another. And I think that the Beatles, for a long time, made themselves like there's no leader. Like, there's no lead singer. Um, but I mean, Paul, in a lot of ways, filled that role. And I know that
Yeah.
they, switch back and forth on who sang lead. And even on songwriting, it wasn't just Paul, it was Lennon McCartney. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but unfortunately, John was troubled in a lot of ways. And so, in a lot of ways, he wasn't fit to lead, if that makes sense. Because I think for most of the tenure of the group, he had his own things going on. He had his own demons going on. And I don't think that he could be the guy that stepped out in front.
I don't think he could either. I think it's a good call. I think Paul was eyes on the prize and John was more fighting himself and fighting the things that had been haunting him. And look, John, kids, if we've ever on this show lifted someone up too high who doesn't deserve it, then my apologies. These men are only
Of
human.
course.
John Lennon cheated on his wife. We see Cynthia in the anthology. She's mentioned, and when they mention her name, they all try to hush the reporter who asked the question
Yeah.
because it's bad for the image, right? So, like, we're not trying to lift up John, but to your point, John was fighting things, and no, dude, I don't think he should have been the leader at all.
No, that is another one of those unspoken things, especially in episode 3. Every time his
Mm,
wife is mentioned, and a lot of times not by name, it's like, hey, well, how does your
right?
wife think about this? If a reporter brings it up, he'll just kind of laugh it off, but you can see that he was getting annoyed by it.
Yeah,
It was very apparent that he was getting annoyed.
for sure. Yeah, because it's something they wanted to keep quiet because it affects the image. It affects the image. That's why you don't. A lot of pro wrestlers don't divulge if they're married or not. That stuff's not in the storyline because it's part of like their good looking baby face or whatever, and it could do some damage. And this is a much smaller scale, of course, but no, that's
Yeah. Um,
a lot more context here than that.
I will say another big difference I can see, um, as opposed to a documentary that's solely focused on the trip to the U.S. and how it was handled here. like we got an idea of the magnitude of it and how big of a moment it was, how important it was to their careers. Um, but it also kind of spoke as this. They immediately started getting into the trappings of fame that came with going to the U.S. and it was really depicted differently than it was depicted in the first two episodes.
Yeah.
And how it was like they were almost treated like an oddity. Like, yeah, like eh, there was a lot of like love for them when they come over, but you also had that stuff like Ringo talking about the guy that randomly cut a lock of his hair off, and like how mad John was about that, and just how like even when they talked about going to the millionaires' homes, and the guy was just like, "Yeah, sure, you can just drive the boat." And it's like, well, why are you just letting this guy just drive a boat just because he's famous? Oh, well, yeah, you got it. And he's talking about how I have no idea what I'm doing. I'm driving this thing head first to the yacht, tearing up the railings and stuff on it. And it's just like, whatever. Yeah, he's famous. It doesn't matter.
Yeah. I mean, look, America's a much different animal than the UK. And, I've never lived outside this country, but after years of, you know, watching and observing and having friends that live over there, you become very aware. Yeah, we're not viewed. It's just not the same experience living here as living there. Like, I think I told you about this off mic. This idea, this notion of, in school that you're taught things like, hey, one day you could be president, like everybody has a shot. They're not taught that in the UK. There's no such thing as an American dream or a British dream over there. It's not, we can be anything you want to be. That's not how they live.
No.
So like, when you make it big over there, it's like, cool, what else you got?
Yeah.
You're not exactly kings and absolute gods to them. Like over here, that's what people become because people invest all of themselves into pop stars for whatever reason they do that.
Yeah. I think there's a bit of modesty uh, to just the European way of life, especially where they came from, because they're not from a
Yes.
big city. And I think that came across, and just the way fame and celebrity is treated in America is different.
Yeah, for sure. Kids, as we noted, Beatlemania is exploding in part three here, as we mentioned a few times here already. The Ed Sullivan appearances is February 9th. They landed in the States February 7th, 64. February 9th when they first appeared on Sullivan. Then after that, we get footage of the early U.S. dates, TV exposure, everything is happening. We have to give a shout out to that Washington Coliseum show because I'm going to tell you right now, that is some of my favorite footage of all time of them live. Because, man, when they do I Saw Her Stand There, Ringo's beating those drums like they owe him money, okay? Like, he is absolutely freaking killing it. And, dude, they're on point. I can't believe the sound is as good as it is. And, man, it's so cool to watch that, man. Just them in their prime, just attacking the stage. And, I love that Washington stuff, man. But I love the idea of, like I said, the Coliseum show, they've got, like, the reception, the fans are going nuts. The phenomenons is just absolutely everywhere. And then we lead up to Hard Day's Night. We don't really get any glimpses, Phil, of like the cracks beginning to show because that's a little ways off.
Yeah.
But you have to think that by the time they get to Hard Day's Night, it's almost like, well, let's film this movie because that'll give us a break from the road, at least for a bit. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like that Coliseum show is just so dynamic. Just the way
It
it
is.
looks of just them in the middle, and you've got like all of the seats and everything around them going up, and it's like they are just surrounded, like in this little platform in the middle, and it just looks so cool. I think the way that they emphasized at that time, because "She Loves You" was the biggest hit for them. They of course emphasized that in episode 2 as well, and yeah, when they did "She Loves You" in that crowd popped huge for it.
Yeah. So cool, man.
Boink Studios YouTube is the home of Tom Clark's 6M podcast. Tom Clark's main event, Bear Mode, a podcast review of The Bear, and Two Nations Under Ted, a Ted Lasso podcast. Subscribe to the channel for archives that date back to 2014, with new content being uploaded every week. And check out boinkstudios.com for links to every podcast platform, social media, special announcements, and a lot more. Bookmark the site today.
And then the freaking drum stage, they couldn't get. They had to move it by hand. It was supposed to move, and they couldn't get it to move.
Yes, yes. Yeah.
Oh, God.
I'm sure if you've seen enough Beatles material and documentaries, like that's been covered a ton of times, how they had to manually turn it.
Yeah.
Ringo just kind of standing there like he doesn't know what to do as well while they're doing it. He's just like, I don't know. Well, it won't turn. It's stuck.
Don't we have roadies for this? Why am I doing this?
Yeah. Yeah, that in itself is funny, but what a great performance. It just looks cool every time I see it. Yeah, when they get
Yeah.
into the Hard Days Night stuff and they talk about how all of them wanted to do a movie because that was kind of seen as the rock star thing to do. Elvis did movies.
Yeah.
A lot of the other big names at the time did movies. And so, yeah, it just kind of felt like the thing to do.
And I love they talk about the Girl Can't Help It. Girl Can't Help It is a classic movie. Little Richard's in that, and it's considered one of those early rock and roll movies that like isn't like unwatchable. Do you know what I mean? Like it's not. It's a lot of those Elvis movies are unwatchable, man. I got to be honest; they're just unwatchable. And I never went out of my way to watch them. I was never a guy that watched Elvis movies. I didn't care about them, even as a kid. I didn't care about them, dude. They just weren't for me. I've seen Hard Day's Night so many times. It's one of the most quotable movies I've ever seen, and it is so good. I think it still holds up. The jokes are cheeky, and they're just the guys being the guys, and it's great. There's just I love the clips they put in the movie in the anthology here, especially of John and the girl backstage. Wonderful stuff, man. Like that movie, Phil brought these guys to a whole other level. They were already mainstream, but now they're on the big screen. I mean, like you said, it just seemed like a next logical move for them, man. I mean, how much do you think that movie did for them at the time in terms of elevating them even higher than they already were?
Yeah, because there's something about um becoming a movie star. Like if you're seen on TV, that's one thing. Like there's TV famous and then there's movie famous.
Mm.
And I think it made them feel even bigger because perception is everything. Um, Especially at that time, I'm sure people are looking at it like, wait, this band is big enough to have their own movie. They've got to be pretty popular, right? They got to be a big deal.
Mm. It's something else, man. Again, I love that movie. I love the way it's shot. I love everything about it. You know, them telling the stories behind the scenes. You know, Ringo was late to shooting that day. So that scene he gets a lot of credit for where he's walking around outside. He was hungover. He felt terrible. And they're like, "Oh, he did a great job. You know, you look sad and whatnot." It's like I was miserable. I felt awful that day. Yeah, man. That's really cool. I don't know. There's just something about that movie that just feels familiar. It's like comfort food to me. I could watch it anytime. It's really good. And you know, I feel like they were allowed to be themselves, and so it worked. I don't think Elvis was ever really allowed to be himself. I think it was like, "Hey, Elvis, you're playing Johnny Domino." I don't know. I'm making the name up. And Johnny Domino's bartender, and he can sing. All right, action. It's like, why can't I just do what made me famous? Do you know what I mean? It's so crazy, man.
Yeah. Uh, yeah. But I think that that's part of the appeal of the Beatles is that um, they kind of served this role as like an everyday man or as like approachable.
Mm.
And Elvis was put on this big pedestal from like immediately. So I think that's part of it. But yeah, also, is that episode 3 or is it episode 4 when they talk about meeting Elvis?
I believe it's number 4.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, all of the stuff that they describe with Elvis is fascinating, but also uh, very believable for the time period.
It is. It is. You know, the way the story's changed is good as well. Uh, in the course of part 3, we also get John wrote a book, and you know, we see a glimpse of Dudley Moore. So these guys are famous, crazy famous. Dudley Moore is, you know, classic comedian, and at any given time they're rubbing shoulders with Peter Sellers and the Monty Python guys, and you know, they just became the upper crust of Hollywood elite, well, movie star elite, whatever you want to call it, whether they ever wanted that or not. Did you know about the when they were on tour and Ringo had tonsillitis and had to be replaced. Did you know about that bit?
I did not. And it is very funny to watch it because they're just like, yeah, I just don't understand why, we couldn't just do what we wanted to do. Everything was like a decision made without us sometimes. And yeah, we could have just waited for Ringo to get better. And I just can't even imagine that happening now. Like the
Mm.
machine just being like, "Oh, we gotta replace him just for these big dates. We got big dates coming up." Uh, and you've got this guy that's clearly he's not Ringo, is not trying to be Ringo, but he's got hair like them, he's wearing the suits and everything, he's playing their songs, and he's doing the interviews and stuff, and it's so awkward. It's like, well, wait a minute. This guy is not Ringo Starr. Like, why?
It's and through the years I've thought about this Jimmy Nickel thing. And I'm like, I don't know that I ever heard anything else about him after I knew about this. So I don't know if he just faded into obscurity. You know, who did he drum for back in the UK? Did he have anything else going on? Like, he's kind of faded like into the sands of time. You know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
it's kind of wild.
Yeah, and I guess if you're one of those people that believes in a conspiracy, this was your first idea that uh, they would do something like just replace Paul if he wasn't there. Now, of course, that is a
Mm.
complete extreme of a guy having
Sure.
tonsillitis and somebody being possibly dead. Um, but this is kind of your first hint about how much business was around the Beatles and how much money was being made around them, and they just couldn't afford to stop. How busy they were, it was just like, no, we can't just let this train stop because one person's not here.
Mm. Yeah, that's true. Believe it or not, Jimmy Nickel is still with us. He is 86 years old.
Wow.
Yeah, he was hoping that after his very short stint with the Beatles in '64, that maybe he could take that and spin something off of it, but it wasn't to be. He worked with several different bands, including a band called the Spotniks, which apparently had a little bit of success there for a while. But he retired from the music business in '75, and since then he shied away. So it looks like Nichols not even done the convention circuit, which is very interesting because Pete Best, I think, it was out there for a long time on the convention circuit, man.
Yeah. I
So
mean, I
yeah,
think the story of Pete Best is so much more interesting. The idea
that's true.
of a what if is so much more interesting than just a stand-in.
Yeah. Yeah, just imagine you're Jimmy Nickel and the phone rings and it's George Martin or Brian Epstein or whoever called him, and it's like, "You want me to do what? Really? Okay." Like, sure. Yeah, man. Crazy. Yeah, as the story goes, Brian Epstein and George Martin were trying to figure something out and talked about maybe using a fill-in drummer, and then ended up reaching out to him. So there you go. But a very, very brief moment in time for this band. They kept rolling on, of course. And what was funny to me is that by the end of part three, they're in Sydney, Australia, and they're on the back of that flatbed truck, and they're getting poured on. And Neil Aspinall is telling the driver, "Speed up, get these guys out of here." And he's like, "Look, man, these kids been out here waiting in the rain for hours." Like, I kind of understand both sides of this. I'm not saying let the guys stand up there and get soaking wet, but these people did. I don't know, Phil. I'm kind of on both sides of that, man.
Uh, yeah. Uh, I could see both sides of it, but also you've got a job to do. You don't work for these people out there. You work for me, and you're supposed to be in a situation to get my group where they need to be. I don't care that these people have been
Mm.
standing out there. It sounds nice to give them a moment, but you don't have to.
Right.
You know
Let them buy tickets if they want a moment.
exactly. Like those kind of things. I think there would be less things like that happening today when things are
Yeah, I
very
agree.
corporate and things are dictated by money, and so. And I mean, not to say things weren't dictated by money then, but it feels like it's even more so now.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. Yeah, it's a shame that that is the way it is, but like I said, man, things evolve or they de-evolve, I guess, depending on your point of view with this stuff.
yeah, everything around just like the fill in and how he's sitting there doing the interview and John and George are just kind of like looking down and looking around like what is this, man? Like
Yeah.
uh
Yes.
and then Ringo shows up, he gets off the plane by himself and he's just talking about how he felt miserable and he gets there and it's just like, yeah, back like nothing is happened. Like just back to business.
Yeah. The machine rolls on, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. The part 3 ends with the Hard Day's Night premiere in July of 64, I believe it is. And the throngs of people it's still maddening how many people there are. And kids at this point, everything's still cool. Everything's still kosher. It's insanity, but everything's still fine. It's going to be fine for a bit, and then it will no longer be fine. But we'll get there. That is the end of part 3. And as we roll into part 4 here, Phil, the way we are kicking off part 4, I can't say it's exactly like the way we kicked off part 3, but we're still in the mania. Things are still happening, but this is the episode where we talk about, the crowds are getting a little bit crazier. It's their first major U.S. touring season in late 64. The pressure is starting to build. The venues are getting bigger. The press attention is getting more elaborate. And the toll of repetitive touring, which will rear its ugly head later, is really starting to become apparent here. Phil, those crowd shots of the city streets, it's like when the camera backs up, it's like ants. They're just everywhere. Cops running beside the cars, girls standing on their chairs. Dude, this is utter chaos, man.
Yeah. Yeah. Ringo talks about not being able to hear himself drumming. And as a drummer, the guy that is the timekeeper for the band, you kind of need to hear what you're doing to keep the tempo. And yeah, it's crazy to think about that. It's crazy to think like when he's talking about how he's looking up and trying to pay attention to where they could possibly be in the song to keep up, and it's like, yeah, you're the drummer, you got to know.
He's reading their body language because he can't hear them.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. There's, and I don't know that he said it in this episode, but at some point in the anthology, he says that he would be playing a different song than what the guys were singing and didn't even know it. Isn't that crazy? That's wild, man.
That is wild.
And by the way, kids, it's worth mentioning, Phil, I don't think I've said this out loud since we started this whole process here. What you're seeing, Phil, on these Disney this is not the full anthology. This thing has been edited.
Yeah.
Because it's fresh in my mind. Even after not seeing it for years, I was watching part 3 and 4 today, and I'm waiting for a moment, and it didn't come. And I'm like, oh, they cut it out. Dude, that's maddening. I'm like, you have this streamer with this multiple ability to show all these hours of, why are you cutting the content down? It makes no sense to me.
Yeah. Somebody in somebody's estate might have decided they didn't want something in there, and it got taken out.
Yeah, that's unfortunately makes a lot of sense. We do get the Hollywood Bowl show in here very early on. Within the first 5 minutes, we get the Hollywood Bowl in August of 64. Another big moment for them. I did like seeing some teenage boys in here too, also excited, because you always get this feeling that it's all girls. Have you noticed the adults in the crowds, Phil, how they're just sitting there shaking their heads like, what is this crap?
Yeah.
That's fun.
Different times, man. Yeah, it's completely different times, different generations. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, every generation's got their matinee idols and their rock stars, their pop stars. So, like, anyone that turns their nose up at any given time, it's like, didn't you do something like this when you were a kid too? Didn't you go crazy for somebody? Come on, give these kids a break, man. Yeah, but you're right. Like, they're talking about how they can't hear each other. It's becoming a problem. They're playing extremely fast. Yeah, I mean, they still sound good. You hear this old footage and stuff, and it still sounds good. But George Martin is quick to point out they were out of tune. It was rough, and they finally managed to, put together an album called The Beatles at the Hollywood Bowl. But it took some work they released it on Capitol, but apparently they couldn't just release it as it was recorded because it was extremely rough, Phil. I mean, again, like if you can't hear yourself play, I mean that's a problem, right? That's going to become a problem for a while. I mean, because their point is we can't get better. All we do is tour, all we do is record and then tour, and then we can't even rehearse. John says that at one point, so that's going to come back around when they meet Dylan. They get to that very early on here, Phil. I don't know how you and I spoke about Bob Dylan before several times here on the show. I don't know how much you've ever really gotten into this guy in the past.
Mhm.
What's your take on, sort of the Beatles' relationship with Bob, namely George and John, and how he inspired these guys and vice versa? What do you make of this?
I thought that bit of episode 4 was really good when they were talking about like all of the people that they idolized, and Paul brings up all of his big idols, Elvis, uh, Little Richard, and how he didn't have to travel to the U.S. to see Richard because, of course, he met him in Hamburg, and
Mhm.
that led us into them meeting Bob Dylan, and how I can tell with especially someone like Lennon and you know his work as a lyricist, why he would look up to somebody like Bob Dylan.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, Bob was I'm telling you kids, if you don't listen to any other album, I enjoy Bob Dylan. He's had a lot of great stuff over the years, but that Free Willing album is quite the album.
Yeah, and I you
So,
can tell with where they were creatively, the music they were making at the time. A big part of how that played into how political they got later, how avant-garde uh, John ended up getting, and even when you look at George's solo career and just like the subject matter he tackled later on, like you could see how much he inspired them.
and I think you and I spoke about this too. Like, if you want to be a pop singer, go be a pop
Hmm.
singer. If that's all you want to be, go make all the money you can. You know what I mean? That's fine. But Phil, for a lot of these folks who actually go from pop singers to musicians, at the end of the day, it becomes, well, what am I talking about? Am I saying anything, or is this just bubblegum pop? You have these four guys who are already musicians. When they get called a boy band, it infuriates me. This is not a boy band. This is a rock and roll band. They were young, so they're called. If they were 50, nobody would be calling a boy band, right? But like this notion that it's all pop and nothing. Well, maybe it was. But like you said, meeting Dylan changes that because it forces you to look in the mirror and say, do I want to keep shaking my head and singing "She Loves You"? Is that what all I'm going to do, or am I do something else? Like,
Yeah,
I think it caused some moments of introspection for John in particular, like you said.
yeah. Um, I think when people talk about like their first few albums and like their like doo-wop era, um, I think people unfairly kind of try to pigeonhole them, like you're saying, calling them a boy band. Because I mean, um, most of the rock singers at that time, most of the blues singers, they all sang about the same subject matter. Um,
They did.
it was all about women. It was all about love. Uh, they weren't any different. They were inspired by the music that was being made at that time. Not everybody was going in there and making anything that was, political in the way that Bob Dylan was. And that's why Bob Dylan was so different as a lyricist for his time.
Yeah, like you said, it's just one of those things where it's, what are you talking about? What is it you're trying to say? And to the point of them singing about love because everyone was doing it, it's that Toby line, right? Like every good story, this one's about a girl,
Yeah.
right? It's what it all comes down to. And we haven't got there yet. It's at the end of the anthology, but Paul has a great line where he says, "I love that at the end of the day, we're known for singing love songs." You know what I mean? Like it was all about that. We weren't like, "Hey kids, go do this, go fight each other, go be loud, be rebellious." It was, about something more emotional. Now you can dissect that, Phil, and we will when we get there. Because you could say, well, that's John, that's Phil. That sure isn't John talking. But
That's
I kind of feel okay with that. That's the legacy they leave behind. Is there's a lot of great music here.
yeah.
Not just pop stuff, man.
Well, I mean, that was definitely Paul's wheelhouse. So of
Sure.
course Paul would feel that way. Um, but also I do think that there's something to the simplicity of their original songs and I think that's part of why it appealed to teenage girls and like the age group that it did, because it wasn't overly sexualized. It was very simple. It was very much simple, like I want to hold your hand, or like very like there's an innocence to it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. If you're a parents fan, you can feel okay about that. We've talked about that Elvis effect, how Elvis had the wild hair and he's shaking his hips, and Beatles weren't giving you that. Beatles had suits on.
Yeah, no, very uniform look, and like I said,
Yeah.
a lot of their songs about love weren't like they weren't overly sexually charged. They were easily consumable.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of also why they got such a bad rep later on. And I really believe a lot of people form their opinions of the Beatles based on this era of their career. I mean, we talked about this last time, and how,
hmm
some people see them as safe because of the music that they were making
Mm.
for those first three albums or so. But I think that does them such a disservice when you only talk about that era of their career. Um, that's kind of like talking about somebody like Eddie Guerrero as a performer and only talking about like the stuff he did towards the end. He did so much more than that.
Sure. Well, this takes us to the meeting with Elvis, and I don't want to bypass it. We talked a little bit about it. Elvis supposedly playing a bass, which everybody shared that story that he was sitting there playing a bass and was plugged into an amp. Tom Clark's 6M podcast is sponsored in part by Radius Law Group. Every day, Radius helps individuals, families, small businesses, and nonprofit organizations throughout North Carolina, Florida, and Pennsylvania resolve their legal issues by providing effective legal counsel in the areas of estate planning, as well as elder law and Medicaid. Radius Law holds the radical belief that working with a lawyer can indeed be enjoyable. So give them a call at 1-800-519-5667 for more information, and tell them that Tom Clark's 6M podcast sent you. But the story that no one seems to agree on is that they all started playing instruments with him. And George was like, I never played with Elvis. That's so good.
Yeah. That one of the funniest things about the retelling of the Elvis story is because Paul, of course, tells you from the very first episode that he idolized Elvis. He loved Elvis.
Mm-hmm.
And so of course he's excited about meeting Elvis. And Ringo, John, everybody else is like, yeah, we met Elvis. They were all great about it. George is just like, whatever, we met Elvis. I never said he was my idol.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, he outright says it. Like, yeah, I never idolized him. So when all of them were talking about, yeah, he was in there playing bass, and I got to play along with him. This all sounds like a bunch of guys that they loved this guy, so they were in the room with him, and they was like, of course, so they're going to put more on the story than what might have happened. And George, because he don't care, he's just like, I didn't play with him. I didn't care to play with him.
And Ringo is the oldest. I loved his version. His version is, hey, I don't understand why he's not out there. Why is he not doing appearances? Why is he not on stage? Why is he doing all this movies? Not doing personal appearances. He's like, we couldn't do that. We'd get bored very quickly. We have to be on the road. We have to be on the stage. We have to be singing. So, yeah. And when they talked about Priscilla coming into the room, see, I don't recall that being in the original anthology at all.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that, the whole vibe was off. His boys were there because that Memphis Mafia stuff was real. Like, they were everywhere he went, they were there. And the Beatles are sitting there going, I don't get this. Like, I don't know, man. Paul said he chalked it up to being one of the greatest moments of his life, meeting someone, but then the rest of the guys kind of felt like, yeah, I'm kind of let down by this.
Yes. Again, you could see the immediate differences between Paul and everybody else. And the way that Paul talks glowingly about meeting Elvis, because again, he idolized this guy. He was his hero. And so the way he talks about it is so different. But Ringo immediately looking at it like, well, what's going on? Like, why doesn't he just do appearances? And why does he have all of these sycophants around him? And like, I kind of wanted to meet Elvis. I didn't want to meet Elvis and his entourage. And, then he basically blows Elvis out, busts him out. He's just like, yeah, but we all heard later that he reported us and wanted to get us out of the country. Yeah,
Yeah, there's some truth to that too. That's
yeah, and that's boy, that's he talked about how disappointing that was. Of course, we don't get an account from Paul about how he felt disappointed by it. Um, it very much felt like Paul was kind of a prisoner in the moment of things. Like, well, I got to meet Elvis. Like, all the rest of this stuff sounds bad, but I got to meet Elvis, so
mm,
I think he treated it as one of these once in a lifetime things to meet his idol. But
yeah.
uh, Ringo was very much down to earth with the entire thing. Like, yeah, I didn't understand this, I understand this, and this guy tried to get us deported. um, uh, yeah, George was kind of not enamored with him at all. John, it seemed like John idolized the guy too, but it seemed like he was kind of confused by it as well. But you could see a lot from episode 3 to episode 4 that John is getting more and more tired of the machine and the fame part of it. Even when he's talking about this stuff
mm.
with Ringo, and he's just like, I just didn't understand why we couldn't just do what we wanted to do. It wasn't just us as a group going to play gigs anymore. It's a business, and it's all these other hands in it and these other decision makers in it now. And I think he felt the same way being around Elvis. Like, I mean, if we just got to meet Elvis, cool, but there's so much else to this than that.
And plus, not only all that, Phil, but like they're still musicians and they're beginning to, as we're getting through the music, and I don't know if we've mentioned it, we've mentioned a few of the songs from 3 and 4 here, but as they're getting more and more in the studio, they're starting to experiment more. John accidentally has that feedback at the beginning of I Feel Fine, and they claim it as pre Hendrix feedback. I don't know. I've never dove into that to see if there's any truth to that, but no one else was doing it at the time that I recall. I mean, like I was alive in '64, but you know what I mean.
I I've never seen that scene, so I was surprised by it because the only person I know when I think about using feedback in live performances is Jimi Hendrix. Like he
Hmm.
was the innovator of that. And I mean, even recently on the Eddie Murphy documentary, there's a part where he's watching Jimi Hendrix perform and he's talking about how genius it was that he used the feedback. And so I was like, wait, John did that first? I've never heard that.
Yeah, I've tried to replicate that on acoustic, just not an electric acoustic. And if you strum the string and then lift the other string up and bend it, you can kind of get that sound, but it's not the same as an amp. I mean, I won't stay too much on that, but like it does show you, Phil, that they're starting to get a little bit more into the creative process. Maybe I think George Martin was talking about how they would listen to multiple takes and really listen to the songs after they were recorded to kind of dissect them and say, well, we can do that better. Let's go back in and do this. So the musicianship is really starting to show here, Phil, even amidst all the chaos they're living through every day.
Yes.
So that's really cool to see. And that's something that stays with us kids. If you know the story of the Beatles, you know what's coming very soon when the hair gets, well, I won't say cut, but when the mustaches start getting grown and certain other suits come into play, and then we'll see a whole other dynamic with this band. But that's a little bit down the road. I love every time we get to see him in the studio with George Martin. It's always cool to see that. And that segs way back to some more concert footage. But there's more songs, there's a lot more than She Loves You going on. They're getting deeper into the first couple of years of their catalog here, which is really nice.
Yeah.
And again, as I said, it shows them back on stage again. And then eventually we go to the second film. So I like Help. I do enjoy Help. But at the same time, Phil, I always prefer Hard Day's Night.
Hmm.
But Help is a fun movie in a way. Help feels more like Monty Python than Hard Day's Night does, and it's also in color, which is different.
Yeah.
What did you make of the transition from where we were with Hard Day's Night into Help now?
Definitely just like their earlier music. I've never seen either movie, by the way. Um, yeah, I've
What?
never seen either movie.
Oh
But you
man,
could
you're missing
see
out.
like it felt more whimsical around the first movie, and the second movie, as
Mhm.
they described, you can tell they were indulging more. They were smoking a lot more weed, and
Yeah.
it was just like everybody's giggling. Everybody's just like, of course, still having fun doing these things, but it's like they're just trying to push through it. That story that Ringo tells, where they're they're doing a curling scene, and it's supposed to turn out to be a bomb, and they run away, and then they just keep running so they can find somewhere to smoke out from.
He's like, we ran 7 miles. Yeah.
Hilarious. Yeah, so I think you could just see the difference in where they were as well, and just like how much fame had changed things. I don't. It's not like I feel like they had became like prima donnas, but you could start seeing like how much fame was having effect on them, um, and how they were indulging and smoking more weed. I never really put two and two together with help that it was really John like, no help. This is becoming too much. It's becoming over. It's becoming overboard. And I know that he has conflicting stories, which they covered in episode 4 about what the song is actually about. But when you think about where John was at that point in his career and how introspective John is uh, throughout his entire career, I can totally believe
Mm.
at that point he's just like, I'm just kind of getting fed up with all of this. It's too much. Help.
Yeah, that has stayed with me for a lot of years too. This thing about John, it's kind of like, and I know this is a very drastic comparison, so I'm not trying to make light of anybody in a particular situation or anything. But when someone kind of hits rock bottom and or something bad, maybe catastrophic even happens, right? You look back, and go, oh man, there were signs. He was reaching out, nobody was listening. Like it kind of feels like that here. I mean, thankfully John never did anything to himself, of course, but yeah, dude, like John has a way of interweaving stuff into his lyrics, and you're like, well, they're all on on the stage shaking their heads and smiling. It's fine, but like you said, he's singing help.
Yeah.
I need somebody, not just anybody. It's
Yeah,
crazy.
and of course, Help is very upbeat. It's very cheery. Like all of their
Yeah.
music around that time was very upbeat in that way. And again, as I pointed out before, you can see how Paul took to fame and how John took to fame. And
Mhm.
I think that John, it wasn't just the fame part of it, it was just everything about it. It was just about how quickly everything changed, the mania around it, and just like, yeah, this is a lot. Just how busy their schedules were. Um, yeah, I could see how it got overwhelming.
Yeah, they never had a break.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's just starting to snowball for this band here in a big bad way. But yeah, those clips of Paul on a boat are always fun, aren't they?
yeah. But tell me, it just you can tell was just how differently, and even when they got into, of course, we've heard the story at this point of the making of Yesterday. We've heard the story multiple times.
Yes.
He's talked before about his creative process and like things coming to him in a dream. He's used that as a lyric for things. But Yesterday is such a great song. It's such a Beatles song. That's why when George Martin's talking about it at one point, he's like, should we call this a Paul McCartney record? Should we call it a Beatles song? Because it's not really a Beatles song, but it is a Beatles song to me. I've never seen it as anything but a Beatles song, even though it is basically a Paul McCartney song. Um, it's one of their early songs that's so synonymous with them that it's the Beatles. I don't ever look at it as just Paul. Uh, and every time I see the footage of it, when he's standing out there with the soul spotlight and he's performing it, and then the rest of the band comes out and Ringo brings him the flowers. It's funny every time, um, but I think that in itself, just that small bit of the act of how they're making light of it that he has a song on his own, it just tells you everything about their friendship and how
Yeah.
different things were early on.
And plus, it was their way of letting him know, all right, do the song. It's fine. You know what I mean? It never felt like, I'm not letting him get out there. This is crap. Like it never felt like that they had that kind of pushback from them.
No, but like I said, you could see their friendship at the time.
Yeah.
It never felt like, oh, this is his thing. Let's get out the way. No, it became a part of the act. It became a part of the show. And
I, yeah.
I think it's different when people are starting to get their own creative aspirations and other things are happening later that because I mean the longer you're around somebody, I don't care how good friends you are, I don't care how much you love somebody, they eventually get on your nerves. And you can see this is a group where they're not exactly getting on each other's nerves yet.
No, it's not there yet. It's coming.
Yeah.
We know it's coming. I also, when they came back on stage and John takes the mic and goes, "Thank you, Ringo. That was wonderful." That's always a great bit, too, after Paul sings yesterday. You know, it just makes you wonder. You may have said this off mic. I can't remember, but like, all right, so you don't want to be out in front. Cool. Then why did you do this? You know, he meaning Paul, right? Like, and by the way, Eleanor Rigby, none of them are on that but him, right? I don't even know if they're doing background vocals. I think it's just Paul, isn't it?
I believe so. There's multiple.
And there's no one playing instruments. And none of them are.
There's
Like,
multiple Paul records throughout their discography. It's tricky. All of the big artists talk about how when something comes to you, you gotta lay it down.
mhm,
Michael Jackson talks about it like how he had all of these ideas and he just needed to get them out. And
mhm.
a lot of artists, that's their process. I genuinely believe that's what happened with Yesterday and some other Paul McCartney songs that he just had things that he wanted to express. He had ideas and you know he wanted to get them out there. I don't think he wanted to do it at the expense of anybody or to put himself up front. Um, but as he was saying when he's telling the story, like, hey, this sounds so good, like we got to use it. Why wouldn't we use it?
I mean, I think I'm okay with that. Like you said, I don't think there was any ill intent on Paul's behalf.
No, I think that he's we've seen throughout his career he's a very creative guy,
Hmm.
and um, once he had this stuck in his head, he had to play it, and it's like, well, we got something here, and then you put some words to it, and it's I mean it's probably one of the most well known Beatles songs ever, and I don't think people look at it like, oh well, this is Paul's first attempt to bogart his way into the spotlight. No, it's considered synonymous with this group.
And it's the most covered song of all time.
Yeah.
And he woke up with it in his head, and it was nothing. It wasn't a commercial jingle. It wasn't another band's song. It wasn't an old gospel song. It wasn't a blues song. It wasn't a song his mom sang to him as a kid. He just woke up with it. My kids, I don't know that I believe in God or in a God or whatever, but like, brother, that's a pretty good case for maybe there's something up there after all. Cause that is, I can't even put that into words, man. He woke up with the song in his head.
Mhm.
Yeah, all these years later, I'm still, yeah.
Well, I mean, I just think there's something about art. I don't care what kind of art you do. Um, and I've said this about writing. And really, when it comes to like painting and a lot of things, I think it is the closest thing to real life magic. You like the guys that get on stage and they do like the magic tricks. That's of course, like there's a gag to it. It's not real. But I think the closest thing to magic is being able to take something that is nothing and turn it into a song or turn it into a piece of art, into a piece of expression. Going and taking a blank piece of paper and turning it into something. That's magic.
It is. Yeah, you're not wrong. It creating something out of nothing and making people feel it when they look at it
Yeah.
or listen to it.
Like I mean, just think about at one point the Mona Lisa was a blank canvas. It was nothing.
Wow.
It was white. It was nothing, and somebody came
Yeah.
there with paint and turned it into the most well-known painting of all time.
Yep.
And there's just something magical about that. That could be just me as somebody that has like, either written or drawn or tried to paint. And so uh the blank page can be very daunting. It can be very scary. And
Mm-hmm.
making that first line or like that first brushstroke on something, and then like I said, coming back and it is finished. It's finalized. It's something really incredible about it.
Yeah, I've faced many a sketchbook in my time and literally torn pages out of frustration until you like I'm sure we've all done that if you do that sort of thing. In the same way with writing, I've, you know, read back 2 paragraphs and go, "Well, that's garbage. Let me start over," because you feel like I can do better than that. You know what I mean? But then once you get something complete, you're like, "That's pretty good."
Yeah. Um, but I mean, with that same thought, I don't know if you've just had some of these things sometimes where um, you don't come in there and look at this piece of paper and it's like, okay, how do I attack this? You come in and you immediately start going and you don't stop until you finish. And then when you look at it, it's like, oh, it's done.
Right.
And I've done that. I've just like started writing something. I didn't know where I wanted to go with it and just kept writing until I felt like I was done. And then I kept reading and it's like, hey, maybe I decide I don't like this.
Mhm.
Or I read through it and go, okay, I want to keep this, I want to keep that, and I want to edit this, but I I I think that for as creative as Paul was, for him to wake up with this in his head and just go, I've got to. I don't know what this is, but I've got to put this down. I got to find the chords and I got to play this, and then the
Right.
words come, and it's just like again, it's just something magical about it, man. And I'm sure that there are plenty of other artists that understand.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. Yeah. And the juxtaposition of going from this, all this success, we've had a year of Beatlemania at this point. You know, some really good albums that I mean, Beatles for Sale is a good album. Okay. And you get that sort of that perspective on the front cover, which they all really liked. Then you're leading into Help, another good album. And then, of course, you go into the guys getting the MBE and the pushback they got from people in their home country. Because the MBE kids stands for Members of the British Empire. The Beatles got it in 65 for service to the British industry. They had brought millions into the British economy. Boy, I'll say. But at the time, a lot of folks, at least some folks, were cynically suggesting that the move was more of a PR stunt. I would say, yeah.
Of course.
Right? But look, I know you and I don't really have a connection to the UK in terms of how we feel about an award we maybe don't understand too much. But do you think is it too over the top? Do you think they were just riding the wave? I mean, how do you chalk this up?
I mean, at the time, they were the most popular import coming out of the country. They
Right.
were the most famous English musicians coming, not even just English musicians. They were four of the most popular English men coming out of that country. Yeah, I think there was some PR to it, but could I really fault them for it? Because at that time, yeah, I'm sure there was a ton of money coming into the country because of them. And I'm sure that there was a lot of attention coming to the country because of them. And I mean, we talked about like how much they changed the perception of Liverpool just by itself.
I mean, and look, you're not wrong about them being four of the most popular Englishmen at the time. They're the most popular people on the planet at that time.
Yeah,
I mean, except for maybe politicians, right?
yeah. So yeah, I mean, I'm sure some of this was a PR move, but I also understood at the time, as popular as they were at that time, I get it.
Yeah, I do love the folks we get in there, sort of the stodgy older guys, and then the younger guy who ought to know better, but they're all downplaying this and saying it's ridiculous. And then you got that one lady, and she says, "To me, they're vital. They're young, they're vital, and they give this country a kick and a lift. And my God, we need it." And I'm like, "Boy, she's a legend. I like her a lot." Because you can see she's quite a bit older, but like Phil, a lot of this stuff transcends age. Like, do you not know what they're doing for? Like you said, do you not know what they're doing for your country? People are talking about the UK again, and like, how is this a bad thing? I mean, this is of course a jaded American perspective, Phil, but yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
Seems like much ado about nothing, but there is a caveat to this, kids. John actually returned his MBE. He gave his medal, first of all, to his Aunt Mimi, who put it on her mantelpiece. And apart from the Beatles wearing their medals on the cover of Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, there it remained until 1969. So in 69, John had supposedly been uneasy about accepting an honor from the Queen in the first place. And by the end of 69, he was even more opposed to being endorsed by the establishment. But at that time, of course, Yoko's in the picture and things are changing. You know, his world is changing. and he decided to return the medal along with a letter. This is really good. Your Majesty, I'm returning my MBE as a protest against Britain's involvement in the Nigeria Biafra thing, apparently a conflict at the time, against our support of American Vietnam and against cold turkey slipping down the charts. What? With love, John Lennon of Bag. So there you go. That's John, kids. And supposedly the letter was sent by Lennon's chauffeur. The letter and the medal was sent to Buckingham Palace. I mean, that's John though, Phil. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. You could see the trappings of fame were very much affecting John differently than everybody else.
Yeah.
I think that there were certain validations that he didn't feel like he needed, and there's a certain rebelliousness to being a rock star,
Hmm.
and I think that he connected with that, and you can see that in his solo work. You can see that in some of his
Hmm.
later writing with the Beatles. Um, I don't think he ever wanted to be the kind of rock star that would accept it, and especially accept it, like you said, by the establishment.
I think John felt like that was death. I think that's what he felt
Yeah,
like.
it just felt like, what are we doing this for? Like, we got into this as a bunch of guys playing guitar at a time when people are like, I don't want guitar music on my radio. Who are these guys? And now we're
Mhm.
up here with the Queen. Who are we?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's one of the things I love about John. I've always loved about John is that he's one of those guys. It's like basically giving the middle finger to the idea of we're going to conform. That's just not him. I've often thought I've asked this question many times over the years, and I think you and I have maybe even talked about it here and there. But what if John hadn't been killed? I just imagine John would have appreciated a band like Rage Against the Machine. John would have appreciated Chris Cornell. John would have appreciated groups that spoke out. John would have appreciated,
Hmm.
certain types of music that, like I said, gave a middle finger to the establishment. I think John would have loved Public Enemy. Just this idea of, yeah, don't sit by, don't take what they give you. You have to speak out. Because I don't know, man. It just feels like that's who John was all the time.
Yes.
Man.
I it just also speaks to who he is as a person. I think he spent a lot of his life trying to find an identity and
Mm,
trying to find, his people, trying to find his tribe, trying to find where he belongs. And when you
right.
know, like, what you know about his childhood and how, you know, he felt deserted in a way. And so, yeah, he's not the kind of person. Usually, those kind of people are not conformists.
Right. Yeah. And, we should point out the anniversary of his death was this week as well, December 7th. So unfortunately, that's kind of weighing over the show here. But yeah, he's one of a kind. There'll never be another John Lennon for sure. Part four, kids, ends much in the same way that part two it ended, where something big is going to happen. And the end of part four, it's August 15th, 1965. And of course, that is the date of the Shea Stadium show. That show's monumental for many reasons, and we will get there when we get there. And yeah, it's going to be interesting to dive into that one because cracks begin showing, kids. Spoiler alert. And this band after Shea is never quite the same again. And then eventually we're going to move on to the next phase of their career where they are off the road and, making the album the concert, making the album the performance. Something that at the time I don't think any other band had ever done. So Beatles breaking records and doing it their own way. So Phil, after having watched the first four here, you feel like that there's been a pretty good job done of laying everything out. Is there anything that maybe you missed, or maybe you thought maybe they should have added a detail or two about something here and there? What's your thoughts about the first four as a whole here?
I think it's great. I think the editing is great. I think the way that they put things together. I mean, even the end of this episode, when they're all saying Shea Stadium, in unison, and like the way that they build up to it, like it's a big moment. I think it's handled very well. Um, the way that they kind of bring things to a climax every episode, I think works really well. Yeah, there's just a lot of information to take in. It's a lot of things to process.
There is, yeah. And it's one of those things, this documentary, it's one of those things that I feel like you kind of have to watch a couple of different times, maybe more than twice, to sort of really absorb it.
Mhm.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's good because if you're a fan, kids, you enjoy watching it. But I'm telling you right now, folks, if you don't have the DVD versions of the anthology, get your hands on the DVD set because you are missing content. Again, they definitely left some things out here. So I still have my DVD set. Maybe for the sake of us reviewing it here, I'll continue to watch the Disney versions, but I may try to fit in watching the actual versions after the fact. So we shall see. Well, kids, that's it. There you go. That's parts 3 and 4 in the can. And we hope you like this episode and come back for 5 and 6. And as we continue down the path of reviewing all of the parts on Disney Plus of the Beatles Anthology. But Phil, before we get out of here, let's get your last word on parts 3 and 4.
Parts 3 and 4, I think, are probably the most interesting episodes for me. Looking back in retrospect, knowing a lot of stuff that's going to happen, because you can already see some of the signs of it. Particularly with Paul in episode 3 and 4, you can see the signs of where he's heading. You can see the signs of where John is heading as well. You could start to see uh, the arc for George when they talk about like how they didn't let him in the writing room and what ends up happening with him creatively, and how he has like all of this pent up creativity by the time he leaves the group. You can already see the makings of that as well.
Yeah, a lot of things on the horizon for George, kids. George has quite the solo career, which we've covered here on the 6M. It's in the archives. We've covered George Harrison's solo career, so go check out that episode. I think we did a pretty good job on it. But yeah, George had quite the career after this group came to an end. But you could argue that all 4 did to a certain degree with John until tragically left too soon. But as Phil alluded to, kids, there's a lot more to come, a lot more coming down the pike. Seeds have been sown for future events here. So everybody stay tuned for that. If you're not familiar with the history of the Beatles and you're kind of following along in real time, we hope we're doing justice there for you and that you're getting something out of this. And if you're very familiar with the story, hopefully you're enjoying our review of the anthology because it is definitely worth your time any old time you want to watch it. Not just for an anniversary year, but any old time. Be sure you come back again, kids, as we said, for the next part. The next part of this, we'll be reviewing parts 5 and 6. So don't miss those. They are coming. They're coming very soon. So keep your eyes open. We're in the Christmas season, and at some point we'll be releasing a 6M podcast Christmas special, as we always do. So keep your eyes open for that as well. Big things to come, folks. But as always, we appreciate you being there and having a listening and sharing wherever you can, wherever you will. But we'll be back soon. But in the meantime, folks, that is the Beatles Anthology, parts 3 and 4. Hey, thanks for listening to the show. Check out our social media on Facebook, Instagram, and Threads at 6M Podcast. We'll see you next time.